I have never played a Hoyoverse game before, but I decided to try out Zenless Zone Zero. And they start off the game super strong. You have the waifu, you have the amazing animation, which they had just a little bit too much fun with. You have the great combat, you have gambling, you have the amazing art style, and you also have feet. They actually animated that a little too well. They instantly throw you into this jet set radio type futuristic world, and it's honestly very cool. But then you continue to play the game and I got a little bit of mixed feeling. Am I the only one that feels like they were trying to make like a Persona type game? I mean, like, look at this. All you need is the Persona music and you basically have something similar. They instantly made you extremely hyped for what's to come by starting it off with an amazing animation. But right at the height of the animation, they throw you into a visual novel, but at least it's fully voice acted. And maybe it's just because I have such a high level of brain rot, but I have pretty mixed feelings about them using that. But before we get into that and also the story, let's look at the combat because you're instantly thrown into it. The fighting is really going to be the main dish of this game, the juicy steak, the burger of this game. But it's also a burger that gets a little bit soggy by the time that you finish it. I know, criticizing the game already, but just let me explain. It's a very simple system to understand, and I do know that this is a mobile game, so it has to be fairly simple for that. Press square, if you're playing on controller, to do your basic combos, and after the second or third hit of your combo, you can press triangle to do a special. As you attack, this bar fills up for the enemies, and as it's filled, you can do a special, and you can call an assist to switch between one of the 3 crewmates that you play as, and you can do some sick combos with that. And as you do that, you can then unleash ultimate attacks as well, and then you also have a dash button, and if you hit it at the right time, you can counter the enemy's attack. Rinse, wash, repeat, that's basically how the combat plays out. The real gem of the combat, honestly, is just the animations. I mean, look at it, it's clean. The animations in the combat, and especially just throughout the entire game, are honestly amazing. And it's also very interesting to have different team compositions that you can build, like you can have 2 ranged characters and 1 for close combat, and there's also different elements and things like that can play an effect on the enemies. But like, there's really almost no challenge in the combat. Now, I'm not super far into the game, so maybe later there's this boss that's really difficult to beat, but honestly, despite being very flashy and very cool looking, the combat is just very easy and there's really no challenge against the enemies. I don't know how you could lose in the fight in this game because you're only fighting a few enemies at this time, and as long as you're good at dodging, which the time limit for dodging and parrying is honestly a pretty big window, you really just kind of can't die. There is a challenge mode that's supposed to make it a little bit harder, but in the time that I was playing it using challenge mode, all that I really noticed is it just made the enemy's health just a little bit larger, which just makes the fights a little bit longer for no reason. But with you only fighting a few enemies at a time, it's just a very easy thing and it looks cool, but even the bosses aren't really hard to beat. Now, for your initial reactions, when you're in that very first fight that it puts you into, you're like, whoa, this is super cool. Like, it's very flashy and it's very fun to play at first. But then the combat never really changes or advances as you continue the game. Most games, as you play, you unlock new combos and you have different weapons and different enemy types over the course of the game, which always keeps it fresh as you continue to play. But this honestly just feels like you're doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, there's different elemental types that kind of play a factor into it as you continue, but they don't really change too much of the combat. You're really just spamming the same combos over and over again, just switching between your teammates just with very flashing animations, which makes it look really cool, but at the same time, it's not really that engaging as you continue. My initial reaction to the fighting was that it felt very similar to like a warrior style game, but it's missing what makes a warrior game a warriors game. Warriors game play heavily on the combos and the wide area effect as you're fighting hundreds of enemies, which makes you feel like a super cool anime main protagonist as you fight. But with this one, since you're just fighting a few enemies at a time, it feels more like a Senran Kagura game. Wait, that actually makes a lot of sense. This game is basically just a Hoyoverse version of Senran Kagura. The waifus, the jiggle physics, the basic combats and combos, it's basically just Senran Kagura. So although very flashy and very fun to watch, the combat does get a little bit stale, especially as you continue to play the game for hours and hours. But I do understand that at its heart, this is really just a mobile gacha game, so I don't really expect it to be that intuitive, so it's just kind of whatever. But with it being a gacha, the more important part except for the combat would be the characters. The characters are basically the highlights of any gacha game, and the ones in this one are pretty cool, and they're really why I got interested in the game. We have the machinist from Fortnite. We have this guy who I swear they made just after watching Deadpool because he wants to be him so bad.
Yo, 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 good morning, ladies.
We have Kuma from Tekken, and of course there has to be a maid, and we also have
Chat.
and we have no way. The characters are pretty cool, not gonna lie. You may call them a little bit generic, but I mean really every anime character is at this point. Each one of them utilizes their own weapons, and they have different fighting styles, and they have different animations, and like I mentioned before, the animations on each one of them are amazing. But the one thing I don't understand is how in the beginning they make you choose between two characters you want to play as either the boy or the girl. But you don't really get to play as them. These aren't the characters you're going to fight as. These are the characters they just use in the main world to walk around. But then as soon as you get into combat, which is the main part of the game, you don't play as them. You play as all the other characters. Like I mentioned, this is my first Hoyoverse game, so I'm not really familiar with how they go, but at least with Genshin Impact, I understand that people want to spend money on the game to get these characters because you get to play as them all the time. Whether you're just running around or you're fighting enemies, you get to play as these characters. But for this one, I don't even care about unlocking characters because yeah, I can use them in the fighting, but I'm already content with the characters I have now, and since the combat is so generic between the characters, it doesn't really change much. So what even is the point of the main character that you have to choose? Why can't I just be in the overworld with these characters? I'm sure there may be some lore reason behind it, but I just felt like that was a really odd choice. Aside from some of them being ranged and some of them being close combat, generally in the combat, they all kind of play similar. And you basically have these main three that you play most of the time throughout the story, and eventually they sometimes introduce the other characters and let you use them as a sort of trial version. I really guess that they do that just to make you want to play them more and then spend money on the game to unlock them. But as far as their individual characteristics, I really feel like the story didn't really spend enough time to build up each individual character and really get me sold on who they are, which is going to lead me into the next part, which is the story, or rather the lack thereof. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm just bashing on this game because I'm really not, and it's pretty enjoyable, but I truly felt like the entire time I was just being gaslit into thinking that there actually is a story for this game. Like, genuinely, I don't know what the storyline is and I'm supposed to be following. You open up with an awesome cutscene of the main three robbing something and running away from some people, but then they catch up and corner them, and then what? Right at the height of this cutscene, they switch into the visual novel, and I just kind of got lost already. Who is the main villain? What is the goal that you're trying to accomplish? What is the objective? I literally just felt so lost, and the entire time you're seeing all these cutscenes and these visual novel sequences that are almost gaslighting you into thinking that there is a story, but you just don't know what's going on. The gameplay and the story just mainly go through just some dialogue and text, and sometimes there's a slideshow that's voice acted, but then you're just thrown into this computer screen hacker maze where you move this little icon around this TV map to collect things, and if you hit the red thing, then you're just thrown into a short fight to where they just make you fight a few enemies, and at the end they make you fight this harder boss. But then you just jump out of this hacker screen and you're back in your main character, and then you just kind of run around, talk to a few people, and then that's really the story experience. So I can't really say too much about the story because I just truly don't understand, and I even went out of my way to go on YouTube and look up other people explaining the story as well. I watched multiple videos of people breaking it down in depth, and I still just felt lost. It feels like they had a general concept of what they wanted the game to be, but they just didn't fill out the story to get to that concept. Yeah, the world, the environment, and everything look cool, and I really enjoy it, but I'm not really sold on this environment. I'm not sold on this city that you're in because nothing's really ever explained, and they don't really even attempt to sell you on it. Which also leads to the characters as well, because with no story to develop the characters, you just kind of don't even really care about them. My main issue with this game is really just the story. The animation, the graphics, the characters, they're all cool, but the story is what's most important with the game. You can have a game that has bad graphics, you can have a game with bad animations, but it can still be an amazing game if it has a good story. So overall, Hoyoverse, you just gotta do more to impress me, because this didn't feel good enough to make me want to enter in my credit card info and spend a bunch on gacha pools to unlock these characters, because you didn't sell me on the characters enough. Maybe someone in the comments can explain to me maybe what I'm missing on this game, because I truly just feel like this is a game of lost potential. It has almost everything going for it. I really enjoy the environment, I really enjoy the characters, and I do enjoy the combat, although it is repetitive, but there's no real depth to the game aside aside from that, aside from just the combat. But my only issue with that is, if it's a game of combat, then they could have just made it a warrior style game, because those don't really need a story, it's just purely combat. So this game just kind of feels like it doesn't know what it wanted to be. They wanted to make a Persona style game, they wanted to make a warrior style game, they wanted to make it more action based, but they just missed out on the story. So overall, I do enjoy the game. If you really like the characters and you really just like Hoyoverse games, you'll probably find some enjoyment in it. I mean, maybe this just isn't for me, but I'm gonna keep giving the game a try. I'm not gonna give up on it, because I know I'm still early into the game. I'm still only just finished the prologue, so I'm gonna continue playing it, and maybe my thoughts will change over time. So I do hope that you enjoyed the video, and you should probably subscribe, because I'm gonna probably make a follow-up video on what my thoughts are on this game as I continue to play, and I'm gonna try the remaining Hoyoverse games to see if I may like those a little more. So pray for me, and also pray for my credit card.